Excellent. Yeah, welcome everyone to the session. I'm really happy to be here today. This session will be about getting started with Eclipse Theia and a lot of opportunities that we can obtain and achieve when introducing Theia as a common platform for automotive tooling. So my name is Philipp Lange. I work with Eclipse Source. Eclipse Source is a service provider and technology partner that is focused on building specialized IDEs, custom tools, domain-specific modeling environments, and so on across multiple domains. And in our tool development projects, where flexibility and customizability to the specific requirements of a domain really matter, we often use Eclipse Theia because this gives us the flexibility to really implement the user flows that we are aiming for together with our customers. So what I would like to do today is to give you good reasons why I think Theia is also a great tool platform for the automotive sector, and share a few experiences and models how different stakeholders in such a community can work together to create a common platform and benefit together from this common platform. So just before I go more into detail about how this model works, one question: who knows Eclipse Theia? Okay, then see you later. It's almost everyone. No, just kidding. I will, of course, go much more into detail, but just if you have never seen Eclipse Theia so far yet, here is just a few pictures. So Theia is an open source platform for building modern web-based tools and custom IDEs. And in general, you can think of it as the next generation Eclipse RCP. So basically a platform for building tools. What does that now have to do with Eclipse Automotive? So as all of you know, and as we have seen from the great talks on this conference so far, the community around Eclipse Automotive, the projects and the working groups like Open Mobility, SDV, and so on, they all developed excellent open source technologies ranging from simulation engines, data formats, communication protocols, analysis tools, frameworks, modeling tools, modeling languages, and so forth. And all of these projects play a key role in the process of vehicle development in general, whether in-car software or beyond. So that means these projects provide a lot of value for specific use cases or user groups within this whole domain, and are really intended or focused on solving particular problems. However, at the same time, it's very difficult to integrate them with each other. Even though there is already quite a lot of initiatives to start integrating those projects with each other, it's still very difficult to combine them so that they meet a certain unique requirements of a methodology, for instance, to combine them seamlessly in a user-facing methodology. And this is really what this whole talk is about, because I truly believe that introducing a common tool platform will essentially multiply the value of each of those tools in this community, because it kind of removes the barrier of creating cohesive, user-oriented workflows that combine multiple of these tools beyond their borders. And that's really the main idea of this talk. And with that as a consequence, if we make those tools more easily integratable in a common platform, we also break up these isolated clusters or islands of users into a more unified user base that can then go ahead and basically, for their unique or specific methodology, select and combine different tools into something that is easy to use from in a much broader spectrum of tasks that you are doing in the vehicle development. And I really believe that Theia is a perfect foundation for that. And that's for two reasons. First of all, the first reason is integration. So basically, Theia is really built to provide the flexibility and extensibility to basically beyond simple extensions and simple single views that is urgently needed to implement certain complex automotive workflows, ranging from not only here is one specific editor, here's one specific framework, but really implementing a workflow that enables interoperability, that enables a user flow that brings the user from one step to the next one, and so forth. And this is really key, of course, in this area. The second main reason why Theia is great is because of reuse. With Theia, you can basically leverage the wide ecosystem of software development tools coming from Theia and VS Code to augment the automotive-specific development workflows with software development components ranging from Git, Jira integration, Python support to all of which what you maybe might be needed to augment your specific automotive workflows. And that's really, I think, where the goal should be for us. So now more into detail what Theia is and how it actually achieves what I sketched as a vision here. So essentially, as I mentioned, Theia is within the Eclipse Foundation, an open source platform for building modern web-based tools that can not only be deployed as, because there is web here, as cloud applications, but also as desktop applications. And the truly unique thing is that basically you can do that from the same source base or source code space. So you write your application once, and then you can later on decide, I now ship this as a desktop application, or I ship the same thing as a cloud application. And you can even switch back and forth depending on your use case, whether for this use case a cloud application is a better fit, or for another use case a desktop application is a better fit. And what it provides you with is essentially a flexible workbench frame. So if you look at this picture here, essentially that means you have an activity bar on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side a status bar. You have different views here, menus, commands, and all of that, which is essentially a default frame that you can use to build on top, so you don't have to worry about these things. The special part, and that's why it's here flexible, the special part is this is just the default configuration, and essentially you can still change everything in that default workbench layout as well, and you have it under your full control to accommodate the maybe more specific needs of your particular methodologies or workflows. Having this base, you can then build on top of that by a modular extension mechanism. That means there is well-defined contribution points that you can use to hook up additional menus, additional views, additional maybe even workbench elements, additional domain-specific business logic, and so on and so forth. And last but not least, which I already mentioned a bit, there is a quite broad range of common tool capabilities that you can use that more or less a lot of tools will need to augment your domain-specific or your particular business logic. Examples for these common tool platform capabilities can be categorized roughly in two, and there is many more. I just picked the ones that are the most typical ones. There is, on the one hand side, application platform capabilities, and on the other side, IDE platform capabilities. So that's also to say, with Eclipse Theia, you cannot just build IDEs, but you can also build plain applications by just leaving out these capabilities in your particular tool. But for the application platform development, what you still use or need is, of course, view management, ability to register custom views, register new commands, keyboard bindings, and things like that. So everything that you all know, maybe already from the Eclipse RCP, of course, can be done here as well, including preferences, theming, something like a file explorer, toolbar, and so on. And now, very recently, Theia has also gotten an AI integration platform that makes it very simple to put your customized agents that are prompted and prepared for your particular use cases into this platform and integrate it even in your custom editors or in a generic reusable chat window, or even just hide it behind a menu bar to invoke some AI-driven features as well. On the IDE capability side, obviously there is a text editor, a code editor that is driven by the language server protocol. So that means wherever, for whatever language there exists a language server, you can basically hook this up into your Theia application and use it directly there. Then there is more capabilities that you often find in IDEs, ranging from terminal debugging support, problems view, output view, and so on. But probably the most powerful capability here is that Theia supports VS Code extensions. So that really, with Theia, gives you access to this huge ecosystem of VS Code extensions that allow you to solve particular development, software development specific challenges. And that's what I meant before, ranging from Git debugging support for, I don't know, embedded devices, maybe integrations with MQTT, where there is great VS Code extensions out there and so on. And you can use them more or less directly in Theia as well. And that's really basically allowing you to augment your specific tool with a lot of existing capabilities. So just to give you an idea how that looks like, I won't show the video, I will dare to show the live demo. I will just show you really quickly a vanilla Theia that is not customized for a particular domain, but is basically just the vanilla Theia that is also known as Theia IDE, because if you take Theia as is and use it, you can basically use it as a plain IDE for software engineering, and that's what a few things that I wanted to show you. I will just open my cheat sheet that I don't forget to show anything specific. So first of all, as I mentioned, there is all these things like activity bars, Git support, file explorers, and so on. And when you click on a file, you can have a full-fledged editor, of course. And in this editor, since we have language support enabled, we have things like auto-completion, you see here, linting, error marking, and all of these things that just happen to come from LSP. You can, of course, also then set breakpoints and so on and start debugging. So let me just try that real quick. I will just launch a debug configuration and so on. And you basically can do that as a generic software engineering IDE, but you can customize that entirely to your particular use workflows as well. And that's the main thing. So for instance, you have here now, you can look into variables, you can show the debug console and say, yeah, please show me this one object in more detail, have variables view, and so on and so forth. So that's basically all you can use as a generic IDE. Of course, you have all these application platform features like views that you can very flexibly arrange. You can even say, okay, I want to have the file explorer in the center and things like that. So typically application platform views that would just you would just use usually in your application as well. Let me just put that back. And most importantly, you have theming. So you already see there is dark theme support, but you can change that. Let me just change it now in a different way. You can also ask the AI, I want to change the color theme. And what then Theia will do, there is a specific AI assistant here within Theia based on Theia AI, this new framework that I mentioned before, that can look into all registered commands in your IDE and then suggest the one that is fitting to your user query. And then you click it, and then you can actually really change the theme here, just as a short demo. What I also mentioned before is changing the workbench layout itself. So this is basically what's there by default, but you can add additional things to this overall workbench. So it's not just extension points to add domain-specific editors or domain-specific views, but you can, for instance, also really add additional workbench elements to achieve certain usability requirements that you want. So for instance, here there is a toolbar support where you can then of course, customize it and add your specific command. So let me just add a build command here, run build. I can select a random element icon here. Maybe let's use this one. And I want to have it on the left-hand side. And when I click now, you see that the build of this project is now started. So that's all great. So skip the video. So as you might have noticed, this looks a lot like VS Code. It actually was Theia, just to prove it, so that's the ID. But it actually looks a lot like VS Code, and this is not a coincidence, right? The community, and us included, we really like the user experience of VS Code. So that basically means wherever there is a generic decision on how to make things and how to design things in Theia, it's often going into the direction of VS Code. However, even though it looks very similar on the surface, it's completely different under the hood. So VS Code, as you know, is a proprietary product, an end-user product that you can download. And it's built based on two things, on Code OSS, which is an open source part of it, and a proprietary bit. And both of these things are designed to fulfill the purpose of creating this end-user, this proprietary end-user product of VS Code, which is great if you're looking for a generic extensible code editor. Theia, however, on the other hand, is really designed from the ground up to be a customizable platform to build your product, not VS Code. And that's a huge difference in how the internal API has been structured. It still reuses a few components, like the Monaco code editor, but aside from that, it's essentially redesigned from the ground up to be a platform and not the code base of a code editor. And this really even goes so far that there is several features in the proprietary bits of VS Code that people found useful for their particular use cases. So for instance, VS Code Live Share, if you know it. So it's basically enabling real-time collaboration between users where you can share your workspace, others can connect to it, and then both of them can edit on the same workspace at the same time, and you see where the other one is editing. That's proprietary. But the Theia community and the Theia project provides an open source alternative, which is called Open Collaboration Tools. There is even a talk on the EclipseCon about that. And the same is also true for remote development, for Theia, for AI support in Theia. And there is several closed source VS Code extensions where the community around Theia provides also open and extensible alternatives, even going so far that the registry itself, in order to host and provide VS Code extensions to your users, is also an open source project. So you can create your own extensions that you provide to your user groups for your particular user tools, even more than one, which is, of course, very useful and great. Of course, this is all not to say that VS Code or Code OSS is bad. Quite the opposite. It's really an amazing tool that many of us use every day for software development. But it all depends on your use case. So if you are aiming at providing a specific extension to augment functionality for a software engineering code editor, then Code OSS and VS Code and providing your extension as a VS Code extension is an excellent choice. However, if you're building your custom tool product on top of something, then Theia has several unique advantages. Like on the one hand side, it's not only controlled by one company, but a vendor-neutral open source software foundation, the Eclipse Foundation, that we all know and love, which gives you, of course, much more reassurance that what you are using is actually that there is not such a big platform risk, and that you can take impact on the evolution of this project and so on, and that there is clear rules how you can contribute to it. Then, as I mentioned, it's built to be a platform for building tools, so you don't have to patch anything, but there is really a designed API in order to customize everything around it. And you customize that in terms of, on the one hand side, adding functionality by VS Code extensions, and on the other side, adding so-called Theia extensions, which give you way more flexibility of customizing your tool. And with those Theia extensions, essentially, it's open for customizing anything you like. And just to give you a few examples, what is typically being customized in such domain-specific tools or in such streamlined, tailored tools and IDEs. First of all, of course, the topic of packaging and integration. So very often you want to ship your tool alongside libraries, toolchains, SDKs, and so on, so that your users basically go to a link, download one thing, and get started immediately without having to install all the things that you need beyond the tool, right? And you can do that very easily with Theia, because you control the build, you create the installer, you can basically just ship that. Second of all, the notion of a project. So VS Code and Theia as well, they don't have a notion of a project themselves. Basically what you do is you open a folder and then you see the files, and then there happens to be some configuration files. And that's actually pretty cool, and I like this fact for VS Code and Theia if you use it for software engineering. However, for domain-specific projects, it's often very, very challenging to skip the notion of a project, because you want your users to have sort of like building blocks in their workspace that are the scope of certain configurations, where you can hook up your specific editors to help them configure them, to get started and things like that. So therefore, a notion of a project is really good. And with Theia, you can put that notion on top by not just showing that directly in the file explorer, that a folder that is a project is shown differently, but also by hooking up project-specific actions, menus, and stuff like that. Then I already mentioned custom workbench elements, like a toolbar, but not only a toolbar. You can also think of, I don't know, wizards. You can't really do wizards in, for instance, generic VS Code or generic Code OSS. In Theia, you basically can control everything and then implement a wizard, if that's what you like. And the reason, again, is not because VS Code is bad, but VS Code is designed by a product manager who decides what the UX they want to achieve is going to be, right? And that's their good choice, and they're doing a very good job at it. I mean, everyone likes VS Code. However, for your particular project, you don't want another project manager interfering with what you think your project should look like and how the UX should look like. So that's why Theia has a much easier job. They say, here is the platform, you can put whatever UX on top that you like. We don't have to make this decision for you. So for instance, whether toolbars are bad or good is actually up to you, whether you want to use them. The next point that is very typically useful for customization is that you can create native custom views and editors that really live inside of the document object model of your UI. So you cannot just create web extensions, which is essentially completely independent web applications that happen to be rendered at a certain place in the tool, but really native extensions. And this gives you, of course, much better performance, much more flexibility, and reuse between different elements of your UI. And last but certainly not least, a very common use case is removal of unneeded UI. So maybe for your particular automotive tool, it should contain certain features that an IDE also contain, but it should not look like an IDE. That's a very typical use case because it is not really an off-the-shelf IDE. So that means you want to be able to remove certain things or replace it with your custom version of it. And that's what Theia as well allows you very easily to do. And in addition, based on these extension mechanisms, there is a particular rich ecosystem around Theia and OpenVSX that really support these additional use cases of creating domain-specific tailored tools. For instance, for embedded engineering with C++ support and everything around it, like debugging and so on. There is a project at Eclipse called CDD Cloud containing several components. For domain-specific tools, you often need diagram editors or modeling tool-like features. There is dedicated projects that all provide out-of-the-box integrations with Theia already that you can use, including also Langium and Xtext, which can be very easily made available in Theia as well. And last but not least, for configuration, form-based editors as well, there is dedicated frameworks. And all of these have proven and optimized to be used and be customizable very easily in such a Theia-based application. So how does that look like when you start now, tomorrow, or after this talk with your specific tool that you want to integrate seamlessly in one streamlined tool? So essentially you start by looking at the ecosystem from the available Theia extensions and VS Code extensions, which functionality you need, and you just pull that together. Then you create sort of like in your product configuration that specifies which of those components you like. And then you get basically the vanilla version of all of that. What you then want to do is customize and brand them into which part you use, how you want to appear that, make that visible to the and usable to the user, and so on. And then as a last step, you add your domain specific behavior, your business logic, your tools, your SDKs on top, and you have three ways of doing that. Either you ship binaries, SDKs, libraries, and all of that you ship alongside your tool, or you implement Theia extensions and VS Code extensions. And all of that is then bundled into one streamlined tool that you can then essentially give to your customers. So what is the anatomy of such an extension? So when we zoom into one box here, essentially every Theia extension is just an NPM package. So that means you can reuse all the existing infrastructure for managing NPM packages, their dependencies, and all of that, which is actually really simplifying things a lot. And every Theia extension can provide a front-end extension that provides the front-end, so like UI contributions and stuff like that, or it can be a back-end contribution that extends the Theia backend, which can actually talk to operating system things like file system, memory, your binaries that you ship, and all of that. So it can even start external processes and communicate with them. And based on this architecture, you have then the choice that I mentioned before, that you can bundle that up either as two things. On the one hand side, a browser-based front-end application that is driven by a backend running on your machine, on a remote server, or even on a Kubernetes cluster. So there is also dedicated support from a project called Theia Cloud to really host workspaces where you then start a Kubernetes cluster, Kubernetes pods dedicated for each user. That runs then all in the backend. At the same time, you can also package this up as one Electron application and then ship that. And as you see, nothing of these boxes actually changed, right? So that's really the same source code that you can use to build both of these variants. Of course, there is then maybe subtle differences when you want to make use of Electron-specific API, but that's more or less then additional homework that you can do to use application menus and stuff like that. But it's also just more or less configuration that you put on top. A good way of architecting your Theia extension that is also encouraged by Theia is actually to try and implement most of your UI and business logic in an actually Theia-independent way. So you can actually implement your stuff in a way that it can be used in a plain web application that has nothing to do with Theia, and then there is a Theia integration that just imports that and adds the Theia integration-specific parts. And that makes, of course, your business logic much more versatile and reusable in different contexts. So that's an architecture that is not only allowed by Theia, but is really made easy to do based on the packaging infrastructure that you have there. So now you have built your Theia extension. Let's talk about now coming back to the idea of having a common tool platform for automotive. What is really important is integrating those different bits in the end, right? So we have multiple tools. We end up with a lot of Theia extensions. Now we want to integrate them. And you can essentially now keep them separated, these Theia extensions, and then add dedicated Theia extensions with the sole purpose of integrating one or more Theia extensions with each other. And with that, I mean adding, for instance, data exchange, interoperability, reacting to events in one extension so that something happens in your extension and things like that. And you can encapsulate that in dedicated integration extensions that you may ship alongside your extensions. And with that, essentially, we realize this picture from before that I mentioned here. So all of these points are your Theia extensions, and then they are integrated with dedicated integration extensions that are available in the platform. And with that, we have this unified user base that can go ahead, look at the ecosystem of Eclipse Automotive, and pick and choose the things that they would like to form into their specific individual methodologies and workflows, including the integrations between them, or maybe by adding additional integrations. And that's really then basically what the community could provide. But the story doesn't end here, of course, because this is then what the community provides for adopters to choose from. What you can then do is what I mentioned before, adding your customizations. And the Theia architecture foresees that essentially you can choose from a set of extensions and then customize them to your specific workflow, methodology, user requirements. And you do that even going beyond just combining and integrating them, but you can change them after the fact. You can say, for instance, I want this extension, but I want this extension with a different UI, so I rebind it and provide my own version of that so that it better fits to my goals. And that's what you can do with these customizations. And this is super important because what that enables is a collaboration model in the open source ecosystem, where on top of this ecosystem, specific vendors, user groups, organizations can then go ahead and build their vendor-specific distributions out of these existing extensions. And you thereby enable a business model where they select a subset from the Eclipse Automotive ecosystem, add maybe something from the third-party components from software development, like VS Code extensions and so on, add their secret sauce on top, including customization, and then provide that as a tool to their customer, which maybe then is streamlined for their particular hardware, for their particular framework, modeling language, and so on and so forth. And that's really what we also observe works very, very well in other domains, like embedded engineering, software engineering, and so on. So they are actually doing and applying this model. And that's really enabling you to have your seamless, your streamlined tool, leveraging from the community and enabling collaboration with the community all on one technology stack. So just to show you, well, no, I don't want to show this video. Stop. I will switch to the actual demo because this is an EclipseCon. There needs to be actual demos. And I went already ahead and created this tool for you. So you see this branded. It's Eclipse Automotive. just created this yesterday. And this is just to show you how such an integration could look like with your particular domain-specific stuff on top. So I've shown you here the generic Theia IDE. That was all cool. We can have all of these features here as well, but we can add now our branding. We can add now domain-specific stuff, like a diagram editor, for instance, where we can then let the user do stuff. Let's maybe just create here another edge. And then let's say there is another tool that someone else provides, and I want to integrate that. So I create an integration package or integration extension that enables to reacting to events like drag and drop. So to migrate data or import data from there to there. So I just created a drag and drop event handler, looking at what they share in the selection listeners or in the selection service and stuff like that, and integrate that in my tool. So now I've, let's say, imported an element from some other tool. Then I want to give this further to other next tools in my workflow. So I could, for instance, now use a custom AI agent for that I wrote particularly to understand my domain models and provide it in a format to another tool for further processing. So I can, for instance, say now, update the documentation with the new tasks that I've added. And what this will do is will actually read my domain-specific model. It will understand it. It will retrieve additional information, maybe from a documentation, and will then create and generate a new documentation where exactly those two elements that I've just created will be highlighted, and I can then take this. So this is just an example, basically from one element from one extension importing stuff into my extension and then providing it further. And of course, obviously, that needs to be adapted to your domain, obviously, and you can really implement your domain-specific integrations, your domain-specific AI agents, and so on to make this really happen for your particular use case. And that, at the same time, while still giving you full control over the entire UX. So if you, for instance, say, I don't like this chat window in the UI for AI because that's really boring. And actually, we all know how AI integration in tools should look like. It's not a chat window, right? Then you can, for instance, say, I want to implement my custom way of interacting with the AI, and I want to enable it with show advanced AI mode. So I hit enter. And then there is this button with which I can add the future mode of AI, and this is how we all should integrate with AI, right? So that's just to show you have still control over all of it, right? So you can implement entire different UXs or user experiences, but still benefit from not only the Theia ecosystem, but also from your community to implement your user-oriented methodologies, pick and choosing and customizing from the existing components. So now let's watch this video again. No. So let me just go further. Of course, all of you, I don't have to tell you, all of what I've shown you is hosted at the Eclipse Foundation. So it's open, vendor neutral, and so on. So I don't need to go into any detail. We are all very happy that the Eclipse Foundation does such a great job in providing this vendor-neutral governance, IP processes for contributions, and all of that stuff, making sure that we can actually use all of that for commercial purposes. But what's even at least as important as that is that Theia in particular is driven by a very diverse, welcoming community. So I'm always surprised to see from which different domains organizations come together to solve one common goal and how they are doing that in such a collaborative way. So there is weekly developer calls that you can join. There is TheiaCon coming up, which is a conference in November, I think, where you can meet people. You can meet many of the committers and contributors. I even see 3 or 4 here in this audience that you can just approach and discuss different things. And you can very easily yourself become a contributor and on the long run also, of course, a committer. So here is just a number of organizations that actively adopt and contribute to Theia. So I would really like to invite you to join this crowd of successful tool providers based on Theia. Here is just a list of organizations where we know that they use Theia. Probably the list is way, way, way longer where we just don't know. But there is actually quite a lot of tools. And as you can see just from these tiny screenshots, they all look different. They all are specialized for particular domains and user needs, but they still share the common platform and apply this model that I just shown you before. So with that, I would really like to invite you to work with us on making a common tool platform for automotive a reality, because I think this enables you to focus on innovation in your key domain, while still combining it with the innovation that is happening in and around Theia, ranging from Theia AI, remote container development, all of these things that are going on in this community, and then allow you to pick and choose everything and provide a tool for your particular methodology. There is lots of ways of getting started. There is documentation there. There is a Yeoman generator that you can just use to start your vanilla Theia that you can then more and more adapt. And of course, there is also community support, community forums, and professional support that you can use in order to get you started even faster and more efficiently. So I would really like to invite you also to continue the discussion. We have a couple of minutes for questions now, but it shouldn't end here with this talk, but it should actually start here with this talk. There is today, it's a little bit loud. Sorry, I don't want to scream at you. There is today a Birds of a Feather session that is really dedicated to that, where we can start a discussion of what are your particular needs of such a community, of such a common tool platform, and what are first steps that we can take to support you, and by that create bridges between these communities at Eclipse. Tomorrow there is also a talk on news and noteworthy from the Theia project. So you will, in this talk, see what has happened in the last couple of months and years, what are new features, what are the plans. And there is also a particular talk focusing especially on the new AI integration and how you can integrate easily AI into domain-specific tools based on Theia and Theia AI, but beyond, because many of the concepts that are discussed there are basically generically applicable. And with that, I'm very, very grateful, and thank you very much for your attention, and I hope to start with that very successful collaboration. Thank you. Are there any? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. If there are any questions, just.
Thanks a lot for this interesting discussion, and I like it a lot. But I have a question. Do you support dev containers?
Yeah, dev container support has been added. I think Mark is there over there. He's the implementer of dev container support. When has it been added? I think half a year ago, maybe longer. Ah, okay, yeah, so it supports essentially connecting to SSH machines, or Docker containers. But the good thing is it's even, powering off, it's almost done anyway. It's customizable, so you basically can not only use the Docker CLI communication to communicate with a remote machine or SSH, but you can adapt it to whatever communication format you may need, if it's even a very specific communication protocol for embedded devices or so. It can also be theoretically done this way. So it's supported and works.
Come on, don't be shy. We still have 6 minutes for questions.
In VS Code, if you want to implement a new custom view, then you need to use your own tools like React or something, just plain in a bare view. And I think you've hinted at it with your native views. Do you have any reusable widget kit or reusable components or anything?
Good question. So when you create your custom view, you have basically 3 options. You can implement it as a VS Code extension using web extensions, right? Then you are basically a web view within Theia IDE or Theia platform. This has the disadvantage that you have to ship everything, all dependencies of it, and it's very inefficient if you load, if you're implementing your editor with this approach and have 15 of your editors open at the same time, this becomes very resource intensive. So in those cases, the second option is better, that you implement a Theia extension that provides a front-end UI, which really is native and living in the same document object model. And then essentially you have the choice of whatever you like as a UI library technology. So you can use Material UI, React, Angular, whatever you like. However, and that's the third option, there is it just happens to become the default choice if you have no preferences to use React. And there is actually, in Theia, React components that make it even easier to implement UI that looks native, that is by default already styled so that it fits to the rest of the UI. But there is no need to really go that route. You can still use Angular, Vue.js, or whatever.
Yeah, but so the reusable components, if I want my view to look the same as the rest of Theia, same buttons, same drop-downs, and so on, then I can use those React components.
Correct. Or you can basically try to see what they are doing. They are using this CSS class or that CSS class, and then you can apply the same. That's also a typical way of doing it. But for a more complex UI, like a tree, for instance, it makes sense to look at the Theia-specific implementation, because then you inherit already a lot of the look and feel. But for a simple form, it's very easy to make it look natively.
Yeah, so I'm currently working sort of like on building GUI thingies for the industry, because I learned that they just don't consume libraries. They need tools to work with. And so our libraries are currently available in Java, Go, C, but everything's sort of like not in the, let's say, Node world. So is there sort of like a bridge that I can use to sort of like call Java libraries, or do I have to write a separate server and communicate via REST with that?
Right. As I'm shown in one slide, unfortunately my laptop shut down because this power doesn't give any power. One approach that is very typical, if you have already your business logic implemented in some other language, is to essentially start it as a separate process in the backend and then communicate inter-process-wise with that. That's what also all language servers very typically do. If you use ClangD, it's written in C, and then you basically have some protocol to implement, to communicate with that. In that way, you can directly use it. But of course, you can also do more deep integrations by, for instance, directly from your front end invoking your backend and let it provide, for instance, the UI, and you just embed it. It's maybe not the most native way of doing it, but it at least helps you to get started very quickly. So for instance, if you have a Unity application that you want to show, that's a typical way of where you would apply this approach. But of course, you cannot, as is, just run this application, this component in your browser application, unless, of course, you can compile it as WebAssembly. If you compile it as WebAssembly, you can still do it, but of course, WebAssembly sounds always easy to just, yeah, let's compile it as WebAssembly, then you're done. It is not, right? You have to implement an API so that this component has some sort of API that your web application can call and so on, but it's still doable. Yeah, that's another approach.
Hi. So is Eclipse Theia considered the next generation of the regular Eclipse, or is it like something in parallel? And if it's the next generation, so will there be an easy way to give our customers to migrate from regular Eclipse to Eclipse Theia in terms of projects and existing workspaces?
Yeah, so good question. So so Theia is not there to replace Eclipse. So they are in parallel, right? And there's good reasons, because it depends on what your direct plans with your application look like. However, it can be considered as a next generation platform, because it basically addresses the same requirements and needs that typical users of Eclipse RCP currently have. So it provides you this platform that you can use, pick and choose from common tool platforms and add your domain-specific or business-specific stuff on top. So in that sense, it addresses the same needs and provides the same functionalities. In that sense, it can be considered as the next generation. In terms of providing more help in migrating, I think in the past 5 years or so, there has been several best practices been more and more established on how you would do such a migration. So for instance, one typical way is to refactor your code base, unless it is already perfectly refactored, to split UI from business logic and then put a facade on top that exposes this business logic as a backend service to the front end. So that's a typical thing that basically you can apply. And you can then keep certain Eclipse dependencies in this backend. So for instance, if you have strong dependencies against core resources or something like that, in the first step you can keep them, right? And then from that you can incrementally keep refactoring, removing those dependencies or migrating this business logic step by step into your more native tool infrastructure. So that's the best practices. What you cannot do, unfortunately, is just take the SWT and say, okay, now this is HTML-based UI, it runs now in the browser. Typically, the UI has to be re-implemented, and that typically also means you need to refactor your code in that way. But that's the current best practice, I would say. But it gives you a way forward, right? So you can very quickly migrate certain business logic to this new technology stack, and then have a longer running plan to do more and more and more incrementally, and I think that's really key.
Thank you all for the questions. You do have the chance to ask more questions if you visit their booth. Thank you, Philip. Thank you to your colleagues at the Eclipse Source as well.